Уважаемый Александр Григорьевич,
Mr. Lukashenko, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the President of Belarus for this invitation to visit Minsk and for the cordial welcome for the Russian delegation. As Mr. Lukashenko noted, our negotiations were really useful. Today, during the talks in the expanded format and when we talked in person, we agreed that they were timely and useful negotiations. We meet often, but nevertheless, to sum up the work by our governments, by our departments and agencies, the job they've done throughout the year, it was very useful conversation, not only to sum up what has been done, but also to agree on the next steps. First, like I said, we talked in an expanded format with the heads of the government, key ministers, and other leading representatives who are in charge of various bilateral cooperation. And then we continued the talks in person, and we also agreed to talk during the working dinner. We considered the main matters of Russian-Belarusian relations in economics, in defense, in security, and we also considered the situation in the world that we have on our hands in general and our region in particular. I would like to emphasize that our countries are closest allies and strategic partners. Cooperation between us is built on the basis of mutual respect and consideration for the interests of each other. We are united by common history, spiritual values, ties, family ties, and relation between many of the Russian-Belarusian families. Russia and Belarus are building a union state together. We are deepening economic integration that is aimed at providing a stable economic growth and increased welfare of our peoples. We stand against sanctions pressure against unfriendly states, any attempts to isolate Russia and Belarus from the global markets. We coordinate our efforts to minimize the impact of legitimate restrictions on our economies. And I have to say that we are doing it quite efficiently and confidently. And I would like to state the successful implementation of 28 integration programs that were developed within the context on the implementation of the agreement on the Union State. We have already implemented 600 out of almost 1,000 integration events that should be completed in 2023. Like we said, more than 60%, which is a very good progress, very good pace. And we have implemented the program of harmonization of the currency control. We have signed an agreement on mutual currency policy and also accounting reporting. We have launched the single system, shared system of following the commodities and the shared customs system. We also integrate indirect taxes, and the tax committee should be launched that would be shared by both countries. The mutual trade is also growing over the 10 months of this year. It has increased by 10.1%. Considering that we've already had a really good basis, it's a good result for this year. Last year, like I mentioned during our meeting in the expanded format, we've had a growth up to $38.5 billion. It increased by 1/3, and then over the 10 months of this year, we've had 10% more. We expect that this year trade turnover will reach a record $40 billion level. Russia is the largest investor into the Belarusian economy. More than $4 billion were invested in Belarusian economy. Some 2,500 Russian companies are represented at the Belarusian market. There are large-scale bilateral projects in industry, in high-tech area, and innovations. In general, Russian and Belarusian enterprises work closely together. They supply raw materials and finished products to each other. We have joint efforts in machine building and electronics, Russia has additionally allocated to our Belarusian partners 105 billion rubles, and I would like to say that it is a mutually beneficial project, something that not only Belarus needs, not only to receive this funding, also Russia needs it, so that we could fill our market, especially after some part of foreign companies have withdrawn from our market. I would also like to mention that Russia supplies oil and gas to Belarus on preferential conditions, which confirms the privileged character of our partnership, and it's a serious measure of supporting the Belarusian economy. We have discussed prices in energy, and I think that when we talked with Mr. Lukashenko, I think all the key parameters, including the parameters of such sensitive prices as energy prices, we have agreed upon them. We also consistently expand the peaceful nuclear power development. Next year, we plan to complete the construction of the second unit of the Belarusian nuclear power plant, and its first unit over the 2 years has already generated some 10 billion kilowatt of energy. Our countries cooperate also in other areas, for example, space exploration, joint satellite construction. Next year, like we agreed, we plan to launch a Belarusian cosmonaut to the orbit. Mr. Lukashenko, if I understood you right, he accepted my invitation to visit the Center of Cosmonauts Training in Russia in the next few days before informal summit of the CIS countries in St. Petersburg. And of course, a large contribution is made by our regions that have direct ties at the local level, at the level of business circles, at the level of scientists and teachers and so on. Using this opportunity, I would like to invite our Belarusian friends to the anniversary 10th Forum of the Regions of Russia and Belarus that we plan to hold in Ufa next summer. And obviously, during today's talks, we also discussed the matters of creating one shared security space, defense space of our union state, and also cooperation within the CSTO organization, considering that presiding over the CSTO starting from January 1st will be Belarus. I would like to remind you that implementing the general military doctrine of Russia and Belarus, we are conducting the joint military planning. We have regional grouping of forces, joint grouping of forces. Currently, there are exercises for better cohesion of our forces. We have created one shared system of anti-aerial defense. We agreed to make all the necessary measures in the future for enhancing security of our both countries, to pay priority attention to training of forces, of troops, to increase their combat capability, and to continue our regular military exercises and other necessary steps to perform mutual supplies of weapons and to work together on developing new types of equipment. And I think we should continue the implementation of a number of Mr. Lukashenko's proposal to train fighter pilots for Belarusian army that have been re-equipped for possible use of warheads that will contain special ammunition. I would like to emphasize that we have not invented this kind of cooperation. The United States, for example, carry out similar events with our allies from NATO for decades. Such coordinated measures are important due to the tense situation at the borders of the Union State. And in conclusion, I would like to thank the President of Belarus one more time for substantive talks that will help us to develop further Russian-Belarusian allied relations in all the areas. Our work is not over, like I said. Mr. Lukashenko invited me for a working dinner, and we will have things to discuss there also. Mr. Putin, dear media representatives, today, like always, we had constructive and fruitful talks with the President of the Russian Federation on the main items of the Russian and Belarusian cooperation, not only us. Our delegations were comprised of the high-level officials. We put an emphasis on strategic directions, first of all, in the field of economy. Traditionally, we paid a lot of attention to the foreign affairs, foreign policy. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Mr. Sergei Lavrov, was speaking about the talks in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Belarus, and he also mentioned strategic agreements that were reached during those talks. This year, if we consider the entire post-Soviet history, was a record year if we consider the intensity of contacts on all levels between our countries. But that's an objective situation. The situation in the world is changing fast, and deepening of these relations is fateful. Basically, we are now defining the future of Russian and Belarusian peoples. The reality, and I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, today we can state that together we were able not only to withstand, but also to find avenues for the development of our economies, unexpectedly for everyone. First of all, for those who were trying to create some obstacles for us. Recently in Bishkek, during the meeting of the Supreme Council of Eurasian Economic Union, we've mentioned that primitive economic sanctions by the West against our countries, it starts to die down. It is important. Now it is obvious to everyone that such restrictions are going to have a boomerang effect, and they hit those who initiated them. And those who are suffering from them are not those who came up with this idea, but regular people, and common entrepreneurs. Let it be on the conscience of those who started economic war against our country and then a proxy war against Russia by the hands of Ukrainians, and they are ready to fight until the last Ukrainian stands. But still, the year 2022 allows us to have a cautious optimism that we are coping well with the economic challenges that we are facing. Unexpectedly, even for ourselves, we are tapping into our huge potential that we couldn't see before, or we couldn't believe in it before. But we need to keep up the pace, because time is even more important than money. That was the gist of our talks today. We discussed the implementation of the general plan of our economic development of 28 joint union programs. So far, some 60% of the total number of the objectives that are defined by this program were fulfilled. We have signed a number of comprehensive documents for customs, for taxation, something that Mr. President mentioned earlier. We need to develop this success, to continue with this success. Of key importance are programs for common energy markets, and we have instructed the governments so that we could fine-tune these programs. Shared industrial and agricultural policies are also important matter. We agreed to enhance our cooperation. We are not going to create any parallel industries or manufacturing efforts if we have something like that, and we will put more emphasis on developing our industry. We talked about the transport markets, about regulations there. I think in the next few days we will resolve all the issues that we might still have there. All these matters will allow us the equal feed for everyone and equal access to the commodities by state orders. We have agreed to expedite, to prompt our efforts in all these areas, because we are running out of time. And we need to concentrate our efforts on changing the economies of Russia and Belarus to enhance their scientific aspect, to make them more digitalized and to achieve bigger technological sovereignty. And I would like to draw the attention of our colleagues. I've mentioned that many times in our previous meetings. You are well aware of that, but nevertheless, Belarus, if we compare it with Russia, is a relatively small state. But we often say manufacturing, industry, agriculture, science, new technology, and so on and so forth. And some of our colleagues from Russia, especially further away from Russia, they were looking at the map and they were thinking where they would get all of it. But that's not only our merit. Our merit is that we managed to preserve these industries that we inherited from the Soviet Union. Belarus, like Ukraine, in some ways, the west of Russia, they were highly advanced territories. The territories that were based on the state-of-the-art technology for those times. We preserved it, and under the most dire conditions, we managed to develop what we had. What we manufacture, I think we can only consume some 60% of it. The rest of it we manufacture for export. And when our Western partners have left, then we were in demand for this vast Russia. But that's something that we've built together just recently. That's why we are able to do a lot of things. And if Russia needs us, and now we see that Russia needs us at its markets, then we go there and we replace those who have left. We just need a little more time and we will completely replace them with Russian scientists and designers. We will create some technology that the world has never seen before. And I'm not just saying that it would be something impossible or unfeasible. We have achieved a lot already. We have accomplished a lot. We have not collapsed by 20-25% of our GDP. In Russia, the reduction would be just mere percents. And they said it would be more than 20%. Some 3% of GDP we will lose in Belarus, but we have not collapsed, and we will not collapse. All these areas are of strategic importance. Such matters cannot be resolved in a day or two, overnight. We need time to do that. Considering the situation at our borders, us, like Mr. President mentioned, we discussed some details of cooperation in defense and security. I thank you, Mr. Putin, that we have managed to find mutual understanding and support on all the matters, and we've made necessary decisions. And I would like to thank you especially, and not as the president, and not only on behalf of the military, for fulfilling your promise. Today, we have commissioned the complex S-400 that you handed over to Belarus, and mainly Iskander complex that you have also, like you promised half a year ago, you transferred to us, handed it over to us. You just cautiously mentioned this subject matter. We were not the ones who started it, about the training and preparation of our pilots who will operate these special weapons and special ammo. And I have to inform you that we have prepared the planes. It turned out that since Soviet times we still have planes like this. We tested them in the Russian Federation. Now with the Russians we are training the pilots, the crews who will fly these planes with these specific weapons. It's not a threat to anyone. Many times, in Moscow and in St. Petersburg and in Sochi, I informed you that it is of great concern to us, this tension along the borders of the Union State, first of all in the West. And we really needed to make the Belarusian state safe. You've made a very important and decisive step to support Belarus, so thank you very much once again. And I also express my gratitude and I thank you for that warm and deep, vigorous conversation, constructive conversation that we had during our meeting with the where the members of our governments were present. Thank you very much for this meeting. Thank you for the attention. Mr. Lukashenko, Mr. Putin, traditionally journalists have some questions. We will ask them to ask one question each, and we will start with the Belarusian TV channel. Good afternoon, Belarus 1 TV channel, and I've got a question for both heads of state. Your meetings often happening against the background of some conspiracies, and you had a dozen of meetings this year. So why do you meet so often in person, and against the background of all those conversations that Kremlin is going to swallow Belarus? Why do you think all these ideas are still in the information field? Russia has no interest of swallowing anyone, because it makes no sense. There is no sense in it. Today, we've talked, the simplest matter of everyday life, but still it's a very sensitive matter for the economy, prices for energy. Today's meeting, and Mr. Lukashenko said the right thing, it was a very constructive conversation, and it was very precise conversation. And they were also saying about someone taking over, but that's not the thing. Like the president said, it is important to make prices fair, and you don't have to be a specialist to understand what is the problem. The problem is that we have different levels of the subsidies. We have different approaches to subsidizing various fields of economy of our citizens, different levels, different approaches. That's why for us it is important to immerse in there, to go deep, and to agree on these common principles. That's why we are now talking about the customs regulations. That's why now we are talking about the taxation regulations. And those ill-wishers or critics, they either don't understand what they are talking about, or they do it on purpose, trying to misinform the people who are listening to them. It's not about taking over anyone. It's about agreeing on the joint economic regulations. And everything the rest also makes no sense. It's nothing. It's just attempts by the ill-wishers to stop our integration. And the only reason they are doing that is not to have any efficient competitors on the global markets. That's it. Mr. Putin, you're absolutely right. The only thing that I would like to inform you about, not only the vast majority, but these are ideas that are coming from abroad, from people who fled. A couple of thousands fled abroad. Now they need to make money because they wouldn't get paid for doing nothing. And that's why they are not even writing it themselves. They are just receiving them from someone else. Before your visit here, what else can they speak about? About taking over? And you are asking the right question. Yes, now we hear those squeaky voices from abroad, but the main thing is the result. And what is the result? We talked to Mr. Putin, to his delegation that arrived with him. We talked about a number of vital, essential questions. Energy, do we produce gas? No, we don't. We receive natural gas from brotherly Russia. Do we produce 25 million tons of oil that we can refine? And two most modernized, state-of-the-art factories that do this in our country, can we supply enough oil to them? And who do we go? To the Russian Federation. And we don't just go there. Okay, for them it's not a problem, but they also need to think about profitable prices. And then this oil should be sold somewhere, and so on and so forth. So we talked about all this, and we made certain decisions. We talked about the shipping, about the cargo, and the president of Russia instructed the government right away to make all the necessary decisions that will be profitable for us. And we are talking about thousands, 25,000? 25,000 of transporters multiplied, it's 100,000 people in their families. What kind of takeover are you speaking about? And oil and gas were not the main issue, but the industrial policies, no parallel industries. We do not want anyone to abandon us or to leave us like it happened before. Wasn't that profitable to us? Russia can live without us. Russia can survive on their own, but we won't survive without them. And yes, we agreed that we will be acting on equal terms. Or we have just made serious statement with the president of Russia about security, about defense. Let's be frank. Are we capable, without Russia, to protect our sovereignty, our independence? No, we are not able to do that. And he did not refuse us when we went through dire times. Now they are screaming, Putin has come and he's trying to intimidate someone. No, but he agreed to support us like a close person to Belarus. Sergei Belarus made a statement about how we will act together, how we will coordinate our efforts in foreign policies like it always has been, as equal partners. So saying that someone is taking over someone, it begs the question, what for? Why? Russia has always agreed to... Russia was always able to come to terms with us, and we are helping, supporting Russia in the most difficult times. We are co-aggressors. We are the most toxic people on this planet. The only question is who is the more toxic. Mr. Putin thinks that I'm the more toxic one, and I'm starting to think that he's the one. But we agreed that we are equals in this regard as well. And if someone is trying to drive a wedge between us, they will fail. In 2020, he did not attack me. You saw this. Russia was not attacking us. Russia lent us a helping hand. They were attacking us from abroad. What did they want? They wanted to rid us of our independence, of our sovereignty. So what else can I add? One more time, they will never be able to drive a wedge between us. Our relations will grow only stronger. And we have laid a foundation with Mr. President, with our colleagues, for the future march forward. And these regular meetings, they are important. We need them because last year, like I said before, by 1/3, by 30%, we have increased our mutual trade. These are unprecedented progress. And now, when certain partners, Western partners of ours, are withdrawing from our markets, for Belarus, for Belarusian enterprises, it's an opportunity. And Belarusian commodities are sold very well at our markets. Agricultural produce, furniture, machinery, transport, Belas trucks, they are very much in demand in Russia. If there is so much cooperation, there are a lot of matters that require administrative support at the high level or at the highest level. Our governments are almost daily working on this, almost daily, because the volume is huge and they've done a lot. The only thing for us is just to fine-tune it a little bit. But that's why we have to talk constantly. Mr. Lukashenko mentioned oil and gas. Yes, Belarus does not have oil and gas, but they have refineries. And at a certain moment, we needed to receive additional volumes of oil products, of gasoline and so on, and we are getting it from your refineries. So it's a bilateral thing, it's a mutually beneficial and efficient thing. And one thing that I've missed, you talked about meetings. Well, the situation pushed us to this. So as presidents, we had to meet often to talk about various matters, to discuss various matters. For example, security. I don't have to explain you that we always have this thing on our agenda. As for economy, the entire world, or maybe not the entire world, but this golden billion or collective West is now attacking us. They're dealing a powerful high-tech blow against us, so we had to coordinate our actions to work like we did, like Mr. President said, and we succeeded. Someone is probably jealous that we are meeting often. Maybe someone wants to meet with him more often, but he is open for these meetings. But he needs reasons to meet, and I'm quoting him when he replied to Zelensky. So don't worry, everything is going to be fine. We are not just wasting our time, even though we always find 1 hour or two just for some leisure activities as well. Thank you for this frank answer. Now, Russian media, RIA Novosti. RIA Novosti, Elena Glushakova. I would like to follow up on what you said, Mr. Putin. You said that you managed to agree on energy. Did I understand that right? That you agreed on gas prices and all the issues in this regard are resolved. And Mr. Lukashenko, you criticized the rate at which the shared gas market was developing. So have we resolved all the issues? What market? Common shared gas market. And I want to ask you about the last night, about the World Cup final. Did you watch the game? Did you support any of the teams? Did you root for any of the teams? A question for both presidents and Mr. Putin. If France won, would have Macron had a chance to get a phone call from you? Get what? From whom? A phone call from Mr. Putin. You complain that a lot of people want to talk to. He would have been the one who would have called Mr. Putin and would have expected congratulations for him. It's just a joke. With many counterparts of mine, I have still have working relations, including the French president. We're still in contact. We call each other, and not for the start of the special military operation. He came to Moscow with visits. As for the football game, I watched the second half, starting from the time when it was 2-2. I watched the extra time, and not for that. Of course, I thought I just had to call the president. I know that Argentina is a football country, and people, they really do care about football very much. They're very passionate about football, about their players, about their leading players, and I think they deserved this victory, this triumph. And as for energy prices, I already said, and I can reiterate this, we have reached an agreement. Yes, we talked about this topic, and we've made corresponding decisions. The governments are going to put on paper all the agreements that we have reached, and then we have agreed on the price. It is a profitable price for us. Russia is helping us a lot in this regard to us. So we now have new areas to discuss. In gas supply area, the only thing that I can say so far, we are satisfied with the outcome of the conversation of the shared gas market, of its concept, and of pricing for the next 3 years. Like President told me, Mr. President told me when we had a conversation one-on-one. As for football, as you probably know, I'm a long-time fan of Brazil and of Argentina. Why is that? Because unlike Russia and Belarus, it's not even philosophy. For them, it's something holy, something sacred. They all are passionate about football. I appreciate Brazilians very much because all of them, they play football. I love sport. It was my job some time ago. As a kid, as an adolescent, I played football almost professionally, so I know a thing or two about football. So for me, it was always Brazil #1 and Argentina #2, because for them, football is something sacred. As for the game, I watched it. For me, it was interesting to see how players were preparing, especially the Argentinians. They were the first ones to go out on the pitch. I watched the entire game, and I would agree with Mr. President. Argentina deserved this victory. They dominated throughout the entire game, both first 90 minutes and the extra time. But let's be frank, God the Lord, during this game, he was on the French side, because it just does not happen. A few minutes before the end of the game, you can equalize in 1 minute and a half to score 2 goals like that French attacker did. But objectively, like a true creator, God, after he saw what he did, he made a step back and he gave this victory in a very emotional final to you know who. So it was just exactly the way it should have been. I would support Mr. Putin. Argentina, with the help of God, deserved this victory in this emotional game. There has never been, even in Moscow, when they played a final, Croatia against France, and France had an easy victory. But it wasn't like that this time. As for Macron, you saw him, you saw his gestures on the pitch and on the stand. Well, I don't want to contradict to my older brother. It's just the way he said. I would allow myself to add a couple of words. I think God was on the side of spectators, first of all, and we should thank both teams for the splendid game, for the splendid performance, because it was a true festival of football for everyone who loves this sport, who loves football. Both teams performed beautifully. They played a great game. So we should thank them for this. But you're right, it was a drama. Until the very last second, they were fighting in dignified manner. But the strongest won. They were the stronger side. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.